Most of us want to make sure that we are on the right track when it comes to our finances today and our financial future, because being on the wrong track means you could be wasting your time and wasting your money, which are two things you absolutely cannot afford to do. In the last 15 years, whether it is online, in person, one-on-one calls, this is the common refrain that I hear. Am I doing the right stuff? Am I on track? Is this correct? Well, the answer is, here are the 4 things you absolutely need to do to make sure you are on track, because a lot of us know we are supposed to invest in the stock market, and a lot of people say, hey, look, I'm investing. That's it. No, that is a very crucial step, but there are other boxes that need to be ticked. So what are those to ensure that you are on track? Let's go ahead and break it down. Other than just investing, right? A lot of people just say, hey, go buy yourself an index fund, call it a day. That is a great thing to do. All right, you're never going to hear me just, poo-poo index funds. The thing is, though, whether it is buying index funds or buying just amazing stocks in general, you do need some strategy around it. What index funds are you buying? What stocks are you buying? And why are you buying those? When do you change those? And what percentage of your money goes into them? Here is why. In 2025, we saw gold take off and do incredibly well. We saw Bitcoin fall off a cliff. Should you add gold to your portfolio moving forward? How much of gold should you add? If you're having individual stocks, how often should you switch those things out? If you are someone who only invests in index funds, should you have international index funds? And if so, how much? What region? There should be some sort of strategy in it. It doesn't have to be complex. Let me be completely clear. It ain't got to be a 30, 40 page investment plan that you got to go through and look at with somebody who has a bunch of letters after the name. It can be an index card level of simplicity here. However, you do need to have some strategy. Mine is quite simple. Now, mine's a bit different than others, but mine is, did this meet or beat the market? Yes or no? Is it June or is it December? What I mean by that is, I like to look at my investments and make changes if need be in June, and I do that in December. That's it. It can fit on an index card, so don't need to be complex. That is how I am choosing my investments, and I'm looking for things that if it's not an index fund, it needs to be outperforming the stock market, and have a process, we talk about that in my research process here, of how I'm choosing those investments and what gets included into the portfolio. I have a process for something that gets excluded or kicked out of the portfolio. You have to have a strategy other than just, I'm just picking stuff. And the reason why is because if you just pick stuff because, oh, I saw somebody talk about it on TV, or my friend bought it, or so on and so forth, is because if that goes against you for some reason, 2 things can happen. One, yeah, you absolutely can lose money. But when you don't understand the why, if you don't understand the process, one, you don't learn from that process if it starts to lose money. The other part is, if you don't understand the strategy as to why that worked during that time, or what was the reason as to why that person thought it was good to add to their portfolio, you're not going to be able to repeat that recipe. That part right there is extremely important. I bring this up all the time because, again, I've seen these things over and over and over again, where they'll get a great tip or they'll hear something that worked one time. And worked one time in one specific context, whether it's 2020 or 2023 or what have you, and say, hey, this stock worked, I did this one thing. And it's like, well, why did it work in that one time? What was your research process? I don't know, I heard my friend do it. It's like, no, you need to get the recipe. What were the steps? What was happening at that time? Was it because interest rates were doing something? Was it because the economy was doing something? Was it because everybody had stimulus checks and that was the reason as to why it did that? Because if so, we ain't got that no more, because we are in a different economy, a different environment. Once you have the recipe, you can copy and paste that formula and have more consistent results. I didn't say you're going to make money every single time, but you're going to have more consistent results. That is what you absolutely need. So that's number one, outside of just investing in stocks and just having the stocks to begin with. Speaking of recipes and analysis, one thing that can help you is to see the stock market more clearly, and that's what you can do with the Building Brand Brief. That's my bi-weekly email newsletter where I take a topic and break it all the way down, obviously, in your email inbox. You can sign up at buildingbread.com/news. Now, next thing here is income, but not in the way that you think. Yes, the stock market is great. You obviously do want to invest and grow your wealth. But again, another part of this is income, but it is in two ways. Yes, a lot of us know that you're going to need some level of income, and most of us want to increase our income as much as we can. Everybody wants a bigger paycheck. However, the other part of building wealth is paying attention to the income in two specific ways. Number one, you can retire early on a smaller income with strategy if you can measure these things correctly. For example, there is something called either A, you can do Coast FIRE, or there is something called Barista FIRE. FIRE means financial independence, retire early. What I mean by that is if you know what income you need, you can actually, let's say you make $100,000, you can actually look, I know what my expenses are. I can lower my income to, let's say, $45,000 or $30,000. Maybe it's a part-time job I would love to do as a school librarian or just a barista, for example, and live off of much less because my portfolio is growing by X amount. And I can actually live off of my portfolio or my dividend income because I have a strategy of investing in dividend stocks. So my dividend income plus my small barista part-time job that's less stressful, those two things could actually give me more financial freedom right now and sooner than retiring at 65 or something of that nature. The only way you can do that is by doing number one, which is having strategy. I can only do that by knowing, hey, this is the type of lifestyle that I want. I need to match up with my income, knowing that, and knowing what type of investments are going to help me to do that as well. Because, yeah, I'm investing. I know it's the stock market, but if I need income from my investments, I'm going to have to invest a bit differently. I'm going to need dividend stocks. I'm going to need dividend index funds. I need bonds, for example, that are going to give me even tax-free income. Those are the things that I'm going to have to think about if that's the route that I'm going to take. Another part of this, which I think is actually simple or should be simple, and it ties into the other ones, is knowing where the income is going. This is actually going to fold into the B word, right? Which is budgeting. You're going to have to know where that money is going and where the money is spent. Now, I did have this question asked to me, and they were asking, like, what's the best way to budget? It depends on where you are financially. There are some people that love spreadsheets, and that's just where they live. There are other people who love apps, and their banking app tells them exactly where their money goes. I'm going to tell it to you like this. I like simplicity, all right? You heard how I do my own portfolio. How I do my own investments or my own budget right now is I got several different banking accounts, but I got one for bills, one for me to just splurge and spend, and one that's just for savings. All right, you can call it the 50-30-20 rule. Very, very simple. All right, so if all my money, if I had all my income, if half of it is all to my expenses, that goes to one bank account, the other goes to savings, and then one for me to just, I'm going to the movies, date night, kids want something random, that is on a completely different bank account, and they're not connected. The reason why I don't want them connected, traditionally connected, like all at the same bank, is because one, I don't want the cards to look the same. I don't want them to look the same at all. Right? And the reason why I set it up this way, I did this when I was much younger, is because I was deathly afraid of all my bills and all the money I wanted to spend, like swiping too many times in my cash account, my bank account, and realize, ooh, rent is due and I'm, $100 short, $200 short, or something like that. The best way to do that for me was to say, look, I got paid, it's split into 3 different bank accounts, and if I were to overspend for some reason, and my card was declined, it's fine. Because that was just my spending account, and it didn't matter, right? It literally did not matter because all the bills were always going to be paid because I made sure that was going to be in a completely different account, safe from everything else, and my savings was always separate. That's what has always worked for me, and I don't have to spend every day in a spreadsheet to make sure I had everything. I didn't need an app to tell me where all the money was going. It didn't matter because I knew that all the bills were going to be on auto pay and everything was fine there. I knew what was saved, and it didn't matter where I was spending because it was all in a self-containment area, and it could go to zero. It didn't matter. So that's how I have it set up. It was much less stressful for me. So maybe it worked for you, or maybe you're one of those spreadsheet people, or maybe you're someone who enjoys cash envelopes. Whatever it is, you do need to know where that money is going, because that's what's going to inform your investing strategy down the line. And it's obviously going to inform your income. What are you going to need to come in, and how do you want that money to be spent from your portfolio down the line? Then you have the one that is the least talked about, and that is the risk management section. Risk management can be, for some people, can mean insurance, which yes, is true. Then it can also mean how you are investing that money, which some can say is diversification. It can also mean legal stuff as well. Now, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to go too far down that road, but you do want to manage your risk from a legal perspective in certain instances. Now, again, because I'm not an attorney, I can't go too far down that road. Right? So if you have a business, you might want to consider talking to an attorney depending on what business you have. Maybe that is an LLC. Maybe that is having certain agreements and contracts in place to make sure you get paid when you are supposed to get paid. That's all I can say. All right? That is not my field. I'm not licensed in that. All right, so that's number one. When it comes to insurance, making sure that, I don't know, you have your car insured and your house insured. Those things are usually required per state. So you want to protect those assets. And then comes to the investment piece, which, yes, I am much more qualified here than on the legal side, is this. Do the investments that you have. Because, yes, again, we are investing, but it's more than just, I check the box, I'm investing in stuff. Do your investments match who you are risk-wise? Do they match who you are risk-wise? Because everybody reacts to how the stock market or how just the market in general drops in different ways. I would not recommend that my dad, who has never trusted the stock market, he don't like the stock market, I would never tell him to buy Bitcoin. That's just too far. It ain't gonna work. That's not his risk profile. He is not somebody who's gonna sit there and be calm and watch a Bitcoin drop 40% in 20 minutes and not flinch. That ain't him. You gotta decide the investments that you have, does that fit with who you are and where you are in your journey, right? So for me, in my 30s, when the tariff situation hit, I was okay. During COVID, I was fine, right? I was also younger, but I was also fine. If I am 5 years to retirement, I might not be fine holding as much Bitcoin. You've got to make sure that you are changing your portfolio according to where you are in that journey. We call this rebalancing. You also want to make sure that you are doing this at every phase. And the reason why I say this too, and this happens over and over and over again, you may see other influencers talk about this, but as an advisor, I have seen this happen. I think the first time I saw this was in 2016. People will look at their portfolio and say, hey, I'm not making any money. What's going on? I'll look at their account. It'll be a pie chart. It's all one color. Why is it all one color? Because it's all still in cash. That's not matching your risk profile. Your risk profile is usually not zero. You don't want to take any risk. Because if that was the case, you would have a 401k. You would just put it in savings. You also wouldn't be watching this video to this point. Because if you are, right, you are trying to invest and actually grow your wealth. So you want to take a little bit more risk than that. Now, because you are, you need to make sure, hey, does it need to be 60% in stocks and 40% in bonds? Does it need to be 90-10? You got to decide what that risk is, or speak to somebody. That person can be me, buildingbetter.com/callcav. But in either case, you got to decide what that is for you. And every year or so, that's slowly going to change. But you have to manage that risk. Not everything is for everybody. That is totally okay. There are some people who only invest in real estate, and that's the type of risk they want to take. Others, that's not. Because when you invest in real estate, sometimes that is a lot of debt that you have to take on. That's fine for some people. For others, it is not. So you have to make sure that you have the strategy, that you understand where the income is going and how it's managed, and make sure that you're absolutely managing that risk. If you want to learn more about the stock market, how it works, and everything in between, you will make sure that you catch these videos next.